Happy Monday, y'all. So this is my Dear Diary entry number 2. Um, I'm often wondering like where do I start with my story? So I always say the beginning. um, and I think that goes back to my childhood. I coming up as a child, I didn't have like a lot of examples of good marriages. Um, my mom and my dad, they divorced when I was 4. And sadly to say, the last memory of that I remember of him being there with us in the home was an argument between my parents where my mother basically told my dad to leave. And I was 4 years old. Um, that's a sad memory. But after that, I just remember being my mom, my sister, and me. And on the weekends, we would see my dad. So I didn't always have the best example of healthy marriages. I did have like family members who were married, but I wasn't always around that. Um, so I guess my view of marriage was probably kind of skewed because I had never seen like black love or people being married and people being happy. So I didn't know how to do marriage. So of course, we did attend like couples counseling um, before we got married. And I will recall that there were two things that stood out for me in ways that couples end up in divorce: your finances and your sex life. Um, Never any issues with the latter, but financial, we couldn't agree on one accord. And as I've gone through my divorce, I've learned that the way that you are raised as a child affects how you see marriage and love. Because if you don't see like love or healthy marriages or healthy relationships, sometimes you fall into a pattern of being toxic and thinking that this is how relationships go or this is how relationships should be. But honestly, a relationship should be healthy, um, with each person contributing to the marriage, to the relationship, not just one person doing it all and the other person just sitting back benefiting. It should be a mutual beneficial relationship of both involved in the relationship. And I feel like sometimes maybe one person may carry all the weight, but why does it have to be that way? And a lot of times that's where my husband and I would disagree because he worked, I worked, but I would come home and still have to work, still have to cook, still have to clean, still have to wash laundry, still have to be a wife. And a lot of times my husband would come home and he would just sit and watch TV. So I'm like, where's the disconnect there? Because if we're doing it as a married couple mutually, we both should be giving and doing something. If you cooking, I'm cleaning, or vice versa. If I'm doing laundry, whatever. But it wasn't always that way. So, um, I just feel like I stayed throughout a lot of like unfairness within my marriage, infidelity, a lot of just things that I shouldn't have put up with because I wanted to have a marriage that my kids would be able to see both parents are both of us in the home showing love to one another. And I wanted to give my sons something that I didn't have coming up as a young girl because I didn't have both of my parents in the home. But I wanted that for my children to have both of their parents, but it didn't work out that way. I think we may have ended up scarring them more than anything, trying to stay together when we really both weren't happy in the marriage. And what I will say is, I think a part of my inner child made me want that because I didn't have that as a child. And when you think about your inner child, put a pin there because we're going to come back to that later. Because your inner child can have a lot to do with what you accept in relationships and what you accept from people. If you were abandoned or you felt abandoned, then you're going to do extra or do things so that you won't lose a person. And I think my inner child did that because I didn't always get that as a child. But we'll come back to that later because that's a whole different complex or topic. So, but yeah, I stayed. I was in my marriage, or I was in my relationship with my ex for 20 years. 13 of those years we dated. 7 of those years we were married. So starting over, of course I didn't want to start over because for 20 years, I mean, who wants to start over? Who even sees themselves starting over? But it just got to a place where I wasn't happy. And I just said, I'm not going to continue to keep living my life being unhappy and trying to make other people happy. And I'm not happy. So, as I said, I did what was best for me. Yeah. So, in a long shot, that's kind of like the beginning. Without getting too much into my childhood, I will say that my parents, of course, they were high school sweethearts, but they were young. Like, they got married because, I don't know, but I guess they thought they were in love, but in reality, they probably didn't even really know each other because they were young when they got together. So it's like when you're young, you just basically learning or whatever. But I do feel like my parents loved each other. I just don't think they were. I just think maybe they outgrew each other. And I think they both were just dealing with their own things that they had to work through. So, but yeah, that's why I probably stayed in my marriage so long. Or I stayed with my ex for so long because I wanted something different for my kids. I wanted them to see a two-parent household or be in a two-parent household. I didn't just want to be a single parent raising them by myself. So, that's basically why I stayed. And why it was so hard for me to walk away. It's hard to walk away from a marriage as compared to a relationship when y'all are just dating. I mean, if y'all just dating, it's just dating. But when it's marriage, you locked in for life. Nobody gets married to get divorced. Nobody. Like, you chose that person for a reason to spend the rest of your life with. So, and divorce is hard because you have to deal with the reality of a person that you once felt like you were going to spend the rest of your life with, you're no longer with anymore. And it's not like they're gone forever, like physically, but they really are. So it's like, how do you deal with the fact that y'all were married, y'all were planning to be together forever, but y'all aren't together? And it's not like that person died, but that person is still alive, but things just didn't work. So it's like a constant reminder, like when you see them, oh, we broke, it didn't work. But you can get to a place where y'all are in a good space and able to co-parent and even be friends. Like, honestly, with my divorce, I feel like my ex and I, we got along better after the divorce, honestly, for a time frame. But anyway, that's just kind of what I had on my heart tonight. Just to kind of give a basis of why I stayed in my relationship or marriage for that long. Not that I owe anybody explanation, but it kind of explains, it made me see this is why I stayed, because I wanted something different for my boys. I wanted them to be able to see their parents together and happy. But it didn't work out that way. So hopefully you'll join me next week for Dear Diary Part 2. Or not Part 2, sorry, Part 3. Have a good night.